Hello again, Andrew here yet again, and this is episode 60. How the days fly away, eh? And we're up to Matthew 14 verses 13 to 21. So, we have a dog. I guess you've seen him from time to time going past the window. We'll start again. Matthew 14 verses 13 to 21. Now, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. Now, just for context, Jesus has just heard that John the Baptist has been executed, he has been beheaded, and that John's disciples have taken his body and have buried it. So when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. When the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away, so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Well, once again we're confronted by a passage with a significant aspect at the beginning which is easy to miss because of the drama of what follows. And so today I'm particularly wanting to focus not on the feeding of the 5,000+. I'm wanting to focus on what comes before. Verses 13 and 14. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. And when he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. As I said at the beginning, John the Baptist has just been executed. For Jesus, he was the one who went before. He was the forerunner, the one who prepared the way for his own ministry. And while that was the case, while he was still there, while he was still doing his thing, even though in prison, and he might have been there for a little while, Jesus always knew that his time of ascendancy, his time of stepping up to the plate, was not quite yet, although he had started. John the Baptist was clearly loved by the people. They saw him as their champion. He was a person who was pushing back against the powers that be. And now he was gone. And they were bereft. Jesus, I want to suggest, had been at one level to be reasonably happy in the shadow of John the Baptist. Now Jesus is required to take his place, his own place though, and make it his own. But what I think we're also seeing that Jesus is dealing with is grief. Jesus has lost someone who's been actually really important in his life. And he's gone. He's been executed in this most awful way, and just this terrible indignity's been done to him. And so there's an element of grief for the loss of John and for all that John represented, but also an element of grief of recognizing that cruel death is a likely fate for anybody who sticks their head up above the parapets in these difficult times. And Jesus recognizes that he's now it. whether he's ready or not. It's now his turn, whether he feels like that he's got all that he needs to do what he needs to do. It's his turn. But Jesus wants some processing time. He wants to be able to get his head and a heart around what's happened. He wants to be able to come to terms at some deep level with the loss of John the Baptist. And not only what it means in terms of the loss of relationship, but also in terms of what it means for himself and what he does next. And so he's looking for a deserted place where he can be alone. But there's no way that that's going to happen. Because it seems that the people are now looking to him. They have now replaced John. They do very quickly and are looking for the one who's going to take up the mantle of John the Baptist, even though Jesus doesn't. And even though, as we have spoken before, he has a very different set of priorities and different way of doing things. Yet he is the one that now the common people are looking to. And they are watching. They see him board the boat. They see the direction the boat is heading in. And they start to walk and run. Can you imagine of them? Not hundreds, but thousands. And as the group grows, it picks up size and momentum. As people get to hear of what it is that everybody's going for, more keep joining in. And it grows and grows. And when he finally lands, there's already a large crowd there. And as he hits the shore, the crowd just continues to grow as people gather and gather and gather. We don't know how many there were. It said there were 10,000 men, plus women and children. It may have been 5,000 men. It may have been 10,000. It may have been 15,000. It was a lot of people. And what's Jesus' response? What did we read? He had compassion for them. Now we've come across this word and the Greek word that's behind it before, splanchnizomai. Splanchnizomai. And it is that deep compassion which is experienced at the very core, the deepest part of who we are. The old King James used to interpret it, the bowels of mercy. And it has a sense of the insides turning over. He is so deeply affected by these people. He sees their lostness. Remember, we looked at it again in Matthew chapter 9 verse 36, where he said he saw the crowds as like sheep without a shepherd, harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd, and he had compassion for them. And it's the same here, the same response. He sees their lostness. He sees the desperation of these people. And just everything in him wants just to make it okay, wants to fix it, wants to attend to them. And so what does he do? He attends to them. He has no time at this time to deal with his own grief. He has no time at this time to deal with his own questions about what happens next. What happens next is what's happening now. He has no place to go. He has no place to hide. He has no place to be alone. There are thousands of people in need in front of him. And this is what he's called to respond to. It seems to me that there's an issue here for each of us to take notice of. And that is that there are times for us when we need to compartmentalize our inner world, where we need to say, actually, I can't deal with that right now. There are other things that are more important, that are more significant, that need to take priority. And for Jesus, his grief, his questions, his preparing for what came next, although it's already arrived, is not what's right in front of him. And so he has to compartmentalize it. He has to take those things, excuse me, I got an itch, and put them aside. It's like he's saying, okay, this stuff is real, it's raw, it's visceral, I need to attend to it, but I can't do it right now. So he opens a box and he pops all that stuff in the box and he closes the lid down and he marks what it is and he pops it over there and he takes his diary out and he says, okay, I'm going to have some time a little later today or maybe tonight I'll diary or put the label down there and say, I will attend to this then. But for now, what's important are these people who are in front of me. What's important is attending to their grief, attending to their sense of loss, attending to their hopelessness, attending to what it is they need. The needs of the many, at this point, are taking priority. I'm a bit of a Trekkie fan. And I always remember in the second Star Trek movie, they started making movies in the old days with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. And the second one was called The Wrath of Khan. And right in the end of it, Spock sacrifices his life for the crew. There's a procedure that needs to take place which he knows will kill him. But in order to save the crew, he does it. And he's divided by this glass screen, and Captain Kirk is on one side and Spock is on the other, and they put their hands against the glass in the time-honoured fashion of greeting of Vulcans. And Kirk is bereft. He says, "Why, Spock? Why did you do it?" And Spock's response is, "Because the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one." It's a great line. It's what Jesus does. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. And Spock dies. And then we come to Star Trek 3, which is called The Search for Spock. Because they fired his body, they didn't realise it, in a capsule into a Genesis planet where things regenerate. And they hear the rumour that Spock might still be alive. And at great risk to themselves, to the whole crew of the Enterprise, they go off in search of Spock. And they find him. And at the end, Spock asks, Jim, he says, "Why did you do it? Why did you do it?" And Captain Kirk comes back with these words. "Well," he says, "sometimes," he says, "the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many." And that is true also. We see that in the garden narrative where Jesus is at Gethsemane facing his own death. He pleads with his disciples to pray with him, to stay on guard, and they all go to sleep. The needs of the one at this point outweigh the needs of the many. And they weren't up to it even to that. I mean, I understand it, but that was there. And so there are times that we actually need to take time to deal with our stuff. We need to say, okay, this box now needs unpacking. I need to deal with what's inside here and come to terms with what has happened. And we see that Jesus does that very shortly in the narrative. He does take time to attend to his own stuff. But for now, he's compartmentalized it. He's put it aside. He's not allowing himself to be ruled by his turbulent emotional inner life. He is allowing the needs of the moment. He is allowing the call upon his life, his compassion for these people, to be that dictates what he will be doing now. And sometimes, as I said, we need to make promises to ourselves to attend to the things that need attending to make sure we don't keep putting them off indefinitely, but attend to them in due time and in a good and healthy and life-giving way. So here we are. And that's it for today. We don't always get things working out the way we want. That's not how life is. It's not a perfect world. Things don't come in perfect sequence. There are times that we have to make choices, and we see Jesus here prioritizing his time. The medical people call it triaging. He triaged his time. He did that which was of most importance and was able to put his own issues aside for the while. And there's a sense for all of us. There can be times in our life we always think it's all about us. Well, I've got news for you folks, it isn't. But sometimes we need to take priority. The needs of the one do outweigh the needs of the many. But so often the needs of the many do outweigh the needs of the one. And we need to prioritize our time and make sure that also that we take appropriate care of ourselves. God bless you all.